Okay, I think we're good to go.
Super. Hey, William.
Hey, Nassim.
It's you and I today,
Yep.
and it's great. Um, I'm excited to do this live. We have a lot to share, and it's been kind of a epic moment in history right now with everything that's going on in the world, and a lot of things that can be a little disheartening, and a lot of things that can be discouraging. And it's always good to remind ourselves of all the amazing things that are going on at the same time, that are preparing and building the foundation for the transformation, the step that humanity is taking right now in their understanding of themselves, the universe, and energy, health, and so on. And so I'm glad to have this moment with everybody and with you. And we'll have a great time answering questions, as we always do. Everybody that's on the call, you can chat and introduce yourself on the chat bar in your browser, and where you're from. We're getting people from all around the world, like usual, and it's always exciting to see. Again, we've passed a important line in the sand that we had set for ourselves, which was to have 100,000 people taking the delegate course. I'm sorry, the that's the old name, the unified science course, and it's really exciting to see that we reached that goal, and now we've moved the line forward. Let's get 1 million people in there, and we have published module 7. So I look forward to having comments and discussions about module 7. And as well, people can put questions in the question and answer section. So there's one question, only one right now. And then as well, since we don't have a host today, I'm doing the hosting, so I'm gonna do my best. But usually I think people can vote on the questions as well, and we'll go with the questions that are popular. But we might pick other ones too. So that's a little icon on the bottom of your browser that says Q&A. And so if you want to put your questions in there, that's best. Oh, people from Quebec. Bonjour les Québécois. From all over the world. And thank you so much for everybody for being here. And William, let's talk a little bit about the work we've been doing in biophysics in the last few weeks. Just to update people, there's been some really good thoughts and advancements, and some remarkable physics that are being developed. And although we can't completely discuss it because some of the stuff is unpublished, still we're talking about the source of energy for cellular behavior and health. And so you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So a lot of our most recent focus has been on the source of cellular energy, which is the subcellular organelle, the mitochondria. The mitochondria are little powerhouses within the cell, and one of their main roles is producing ATP. This is uh, a nucleotide energy carrying molecule, adenosine triphosphate. And it's used by the cell as kind of the energy currency. As well, it's a primary signaling molecule within the cell. So it's important in many of the intercellular signaling pathways. This is going to regulate things like DNA repair, replication, transcription, and a lot of functions in the central core metabolism of the cell.
Including its aging functions and so on.
So very important in kind of determining a lot of the parameters of the health and longevity of the cell. It has a lot to do with how the mitochondria are functioning. And if you're having efficient and even optimal or suboptimal production of this critical central molecule, ATP. And when we start investigating the physics of the production of this energy molecule, it is extremely interesting because immediately we can see parallels with some of the mechanisms involved in, I guess you could call it the universal production of energy, the universal exchange of energy and information. Even the relationship between the Planck level vacuum energy, the Planck spherical unit, and the proton mass, and the proton and the electron, some of the mechanics of.
Yeah, totally. But and the gradient between the scales, you know, driving energy, and but you jump to the scaling, but what I'm wanted to discuss as well is the little motors. You know, we talked about the little motors, and the reason why I'm so interested is that the little motors that are producing this ATP molecule, you know, that are ripping protons, they're moving protons from one potential to another. Is that correct?
Across a gradient, yeah. So a proton gradient, yeah.
Exactly. So thinking about the universal gradient, and then thinking about the application at each scale, so that's where you were going, you know, is that that gradient is observable as well at the biological scale, and if we have the mechanics, which we do for the other gradients, then when we apply it at the biological scale, we get an insight into how to bring this energy production to its highest level of coherency, and for both health and life extension. And so that's really exciting. But those little motors, they're amazing because, you know, we've discussed them before, and we were talking about them spinning around 8,000 RPM. They're in a fluid, they're in water, correct?
Yes, yep, yeah.
So
the mitochondrial intermembrane fluid, which is water at a pH of 2, because
wow,
it's packed with protons, like that many hydrogen ions, and then the matrix aqueous compartment, which is water as well.
so really high energy potential water.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
You could almost think of the water in there as almost like in a plasma state.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it veritably is a plasma. I mean, I bet that to model it precisely, um, well, I should say probably more matter of factly that to model it precisely, you would need plasma magnetohydrodynamic applications,
Equations.
equations.
Yeah, so in fluid dynamics,
Mhm.
and this is where it meets the physics that Olivier Alérol, Dr. Alérol, and I are writing right now on describing the structure of space as a fluid or superfluid or non-Newtonian fluid in some case, and that as well, how that fluid, the circulation of that fluid energize each scales. And so it's really cool to find it at the biological scale. And I'm being a little facetious there with the cool part. And the idea is that so these little motors are spinning at like 8,000 RPM in a mm, plasma fluid that is highly energized. And you can imagine that it's producing vorticity in that fluid, and that there's all kinds of dynamics that are occurring. And these dynamics they're not low energy dynamics, they're high energy dynamics, right? So, because that's the other thing we were finding is that well, it's spinning at 8,000 RPM, which is already remarkable, right? But that's at rest, correct? Like that's when it's not making too much ATP because it's chilling. But if you're running a marathon, at what speed is it spinning at?
It can go up to 60,000 RPM, which that's now, to my understanding, the fastest thing in the biological system in the cell.
Right. So that's non-trivial rotation. It's a high speed, high energy motor. It's at the edge of what we can do in magnetic motors, in the mechanical sense of the scale at which we build them, for instance, very advanced magnetic bearing motors for instance, for pumps, for vacuum chambers can have RPMs in the 70,000 RPMs and so on. And then there's very, very sophisticated one that can go a little faster. But in general, magnetic motors that we build spin at 5,000 to 10,000 RPM. Those are already hard to achieve. So imagine a biological dynamics in which a little, really, it's very much like a little electromagnetic motor is spinning at 60,000 RPM, producing vorticity in the fluid, which requires quite a bit of torque and so on for that. And then how many of these little motors is there?
So within a single mitochondrion, there are thousands of these motors. To give kind of an idea of the architecture of this energetic powerhouse, so the mitochondria is a double layered, a double membrane organelle. So it has this inner membrane enveloped by an outer membrane. Along this inner membrane, there are just thousands of these little molecular motors. These rotors spinning anywhere from 8,000 to 6,000 RPM. So I mean, the amount of energetic flux occurring at this site is just tremendous.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then how many mitochondria are in the cell?
So then there can be anywhere from 100 to 1,000 mitochondria in a single cell. So, I mean, we're easily talking about hundreds of thousands of these motors operating in a single cell.
Oh, right. And then, you know, of course, 50 to 100 trillion cells in the body, you know, that's a lot of the little motors. So that means that I think in general, if you do nothing during the day, if you're like a couch potato and you're binging on, you know, Netflix or something, uh, or Gaia TV or whatever it is, um, you will actually recycle your approximately your body mass in the ATP molecule during that day. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So, and then if you run a marathon, now your little guys are spinning in like the vicinity of 50 to 60,000 RPM, right? So now they're making way more ATP. And how much will you do in during that run of like in a marathon?
So you'll recycle the equivalent of a metric ton of ATP.
Right.
You know, and so we say regenerate just because what it'll do is you'll have that ATP, and it's got these three high energy phosphate groups, and it goes out and it'll donate those phosphate groups, say to the myosin actin filaments in your muscle fibers. So you're running, you're constantly contracting those muscle fibers. They need a constant feed of ATP. And every time it does that, it's making ADP, adenosine phosphate. And now it goes back to the mitochondria, and the mitochondria puts a third high energy phosphate group on and regenerates it back into ATP. So if you're running a marathon, the amount of that regeneration that's occurring is a metric ton of that ATP, the equivalent of that amount.
Wow, it's remarkable. And it really shows that, you know, we need to start looking at the body in terms of a high energy physics or a high energy, uh, you know, biology structure, and in, but but even more profoundly in terms of its energetic field, in terms of its energetic system, in terms of its electromagnetic dynamics, its magnetic and electric dynamics, you know, which drives all of the metabolism that is occurring, right? I mean, it's all electric potentials.
Yeah, you know, it's weird because it's so commonly, so conventionally considered as, well, it's chemical reactions, right? It's all biochemical networks, but really, I mean, what's occurring is the movement of charge. It's a, you're exchanging electrons and protons, and you're generating electromagnetic fields, even in many instances, highly coherent electromagnetic fields. So it really more appropriately, more fundamentally, perhaps, is in the domain of physics, of you know, electronic, magnetic interactions and charge carriers and charge exchange.
Yeah, this is where, you know, the separations between the different fields in science bites us again. You know, the idea that there's chemistry here and there's physics there, there's biology here, and you know these fields are not well correlated. Even between physics and chemistry, there's a huge discrepancy in terms of molecular structures being explained from fundamental physics. And so it's kind of floating, you know, chemistry is kind of floating with not a very good base for its scale, where, you know, molecular structures are still considered to be part of the domain of quantum theory. And quantum effects are occurring at the molecular scale and larger. Now we have entanglement of diamonds in the laboratory, for instance. So, you know, we're talking about millions of molecules and billions, you know, as well. And so these things are not well correlated, and that's the problem. And so because it's missing a theory that unifies all these scales. And so, but when that comes out, and we have now a framework, formalized framework, where the structure of different scales, or the dynamics of different scales, become apparent, including at the chemical level, so that chemistry and the formation of molecules is better understood. And then the energy potential gradient that is generated at the biological level becomes something that's well defined in terms of its physics. And so it's not just like, oh, it's like you said, oh, it's sodium potassium exchange, in like the brain, or it's said lightly, like oh, it's just chemicals that are moving, but what's actually moving around is charge and energy potential. And these energy potentials, they don't quite have a clear source, meaning you can say, well, you eat food and then the food is converted and da 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 da. But if you don't know where these protons and electrons and all these things are actually getting their energy source from, then you still haven't really said where the energy is coming from. Never mind that if you do the summation of the energy required for the body and how much energy is required to extract the ingredients from what we ingest and all this, it doesn't seem to add up fully, does it?
Well, it's very difficult to get an exact measurement for total in, total out. So there's room for people to kind of adjust, on some assumptions on, well, probably this amount is required for this function. And, but I mean, it seems to me like,
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just saying, let's just say that it's fairly loose, like just like the relationship between quantum theory and chemistry is fairly loose. And never mind that quantum theory itself has 21 free parameters and so on. But more profoundly is that now we have the equations. We've solved these equations in the paper that we're writing right now, and it's really exciting to see it apply to the biological scale so beautifully, so clearly, and output really a very comprehensive understanding on how the biological scale gets to emerge, as well from the physics, but as well, like what we were discussing earlier this week, you and I, is that, well, these mitochondria things, they're very much involved in interacting with the microtubules and interacting with cellular interaction in the brain, right? So they're in high concentration in the cellular structure metric of the brain, correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So it's really astonishing if you look at some of the concentration of the mitochondria at like the synapse of the neuron. So that's kind of the communication junction for the neurons in the brain. So you'll have a dendrite and an axon. And if you look underneath the membrane of that synapse, it's just packed full of mitochondria. because they're just integral to this communication. That certainly the energetic requirements of passing these electrochemical currents along the neuronal system, but probably at a deeper level as well.
Right. So basically, it's your mitochondria thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
So, which is considered a bacteria, right?
It came from a bacteria. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Right.
it was a symbiont. So 1.5, 2 billion years ago, a bacteria took up residence in the archaea, and they kind of got a symbiotic relationship going on where the archaea would scrounge up sugars and fats, food, and give it to the bacteria, and the bacteria would give the archaea ATP.
Right. So basically, those little manufacturing systems of energy partner up with other systems to create this collaborative effort, which was critical at the time because I used to discuss this with Elizabeth Saturis in the 90s, actually, when we were having our conferences and having tea and talking about the universe together. Dr. Saturis is an evolutionary biologist, and she was talking about how in early times, there was almost an extinction of bacterium when there was only bacterium on the planet, because the pollutant of the day was oxygen, and they were producing too much oxygen and it was killing everybody. And how they transcended, and at the time the bacteriums were in competition, and how they transcended the difficulty by collaboration, by moving towards collaboration and starting to exchange, as you were just describing.
And that's a key concept that you brought up there is collaboration, because even at, I think, the inception, like the earliest beginnings, when actually what you're talking about mainly is molecular replicators, early molecular replicators that are forming a autocatalytic network of primordial metabolism. Even there, what is critical is the development of collaboration among molecules. But kind of true to that fractal hierarchy of the system, that fractal coordination of the system. Is there at the small scales in the earliest inception, and then you have collaboration at each step of the way, bringing life to like higher levels of expression of operational efficiency and function. At the single cell level, when the bacteria and archaea came together to form multicellular life. And just the examples are kind of endless, but I think it's kind of a key lesson is that the way that life has thrived and evolved into this amazing diversity is through collaboration.
Right. And you were talking about fractals. Maybe humanity is at that point right now, because as a result of this collaboration in the early days, the pollutant of the day, which was oxygen, became the fuel of the future, because the collaboration produced multicellular systems that could metabolize oxygen in such a way to produce energy out of it, and so on, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that prior to that transition, oxygen was a toxin, so something that most life forms were trying their best to avoid at all costs. And then via this collaboration, the formation of the mitochondria, the chloroplast, you get this wonderful symbiotic network where what was once a toxin, this oxygen, is now a fuel for the mitochondria. And now it's powering all cellular life. It's absolutely essential for all multicellular life.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's remarkable, and it really is such a metaphor for our, moment in history right now. And I might dare to say the word love is important. Collaboration, empathy, our capacity to interact with each other in a way that is productive, and that is unified in our goal. And this is why, the paper we're about to release and some of the work that we're about to bring into the world, and some of the work that we publish with module 7 in the course is really important, and we need to really let people know. And really, module 7 is just catching up people, because the course was written almost 8 years ago or so, and there was many papers that were published afterwards. So module 7 catches up everybody to the current state of the papers that were published, and then module 8 will come out very soon, and that will have all the information about the paper we're working on right now. And that's really kind of like the conclusion of a very important part of the unification. It actually does the job and unifies all scales, all constants, and all forces in a very accurate way with very high level of accuracy. And it gives a very, very beautiful and incredible understanding and picture of the mechanics of creation, from subatomic particles like sub-Planckian level to biology and stars, galaxies, clusters, superclusters, universes, and so on. And it's like I said, it's extremely accurate. That we can go, in terms of it, predicting masses, radiuses, temperatures, energy level, electromagnetic radiation, magnetic fields, but at the most fundamental level. Meaning, when I say mass, I don't just mean, oh well, it's a way to understand mass using mass. It's from first principle extracting mass from this gradient of space and the structure of the vacuum. And then when we apply that at biological scale, it really gives us a remarkable understanding on how really these little energy factories eventually produced multicellular biological structures that have the capacity to become self-aware. And and how this energy potential is really just, it's an information exchange across the universal scales that you're part of. You're being, like, you're literally driven by this, like the stuff in you that's spinning at really high velocity, producing lots of energy and exchanging protons and electrons and so on in your body in such a way that, like, there's an information flow, and that information flow you're calling your consciousness. And that awareness that consciousness has an impact on how the information is flowing and how much energy there is in it and so on. And knowing that as well, we can develop technology to increase the energy flow in regions and so on, and that can have really significant impact on humanity. So we have a bunch of questions already, and if you wanted to pick some, we can bring people on. I don't know if you have that capacity, William.
I don't know if
Maybe Jamie
I
can.
can assist.
Jamie can pull them up for us.
Yeah, I can pull them up.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie. And just a reminder to folks, when you enter a question into the Q&A, that's where we're going to pull from. And also, we have a voting mechanism where if you see a question that you'd really like us to go over, give it a thumbs up. It'll bring it higher up to the list. It's more likely that we'll get to that question. So starting off just from the top of the list here, we have Sabine Priestley. And it's been asked, Nassim, your energy clearing technique you gave in your Gaia event in January was amazing. Care to share with the group?
Oh, we're bringing her on. Hi, can you hear us? Sabine? Oh, maybe you're muted. No, you're not muted.
Okay, is this better?
Oh, yeah, we see you. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
It's great to be here. I've been following you for quite a while. And this question comes, I sort of binged watched your January event at Gaiasphere, which should be sort of like required watching for all humanity as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
And you mentioned something briefly, and then you did go back to it the next day. And in between there, I asked in the group here, but nobody knew what I was talking about. So it's clearing energy. It's a technique that you've done, and it has to go back with going back in time along the spiral path that we travel.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of blew my mind. And I've been playing with that technique, and I thought that everybody in this group would probably love to hear about it.
Okay, great. Yeah. Where are you at, Sabine?
St. Pete, Florida, and it's Sabine.
Oh, Sabine. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries.
From Florida, right on. So yeah, there's so it's a really good thing to know how the mechanics of you interacting with the universe is, right? Like, and one of them, which is like really critical, is how you actually retain memories. Because memory is not obvious in biology. They can't find it in the brain, and that's because it's not in the brain. They can block it, meaning they know, like, if they block certain parts of the brain, then you lose certain pieces of memory and so on. But that just means that your antenna is not able to tune into a certain set of information. You mess up the antenna, so of course now, right? So, but that doesn't mean the memory is actually in there, because it's like the amount of memory is remarkable. Just like, the fact that the memory of the shape of your nose, comes from maybe generations back, one ancestor that had a certain shape and so on. And it influenced the shape of your nose today, which in my case, might be from like the Middle East or whatever. And so, this is not necessarily clear that it could be held linearly, like in the genes, but you can think of the genes accessing a set of information that's in the structure of space. So in order to answer the question, I'm going to try to make it short. just so that the listeners understand where I'm coming from, the concept of information, or memory, is something that I've brought up to the level of physics, meaning that, like, I changed the word space-time to the word space memory, because and wrote paper with William on this, and Dr. Amira Valbaker on this, because the concept of time is undefined in physics, meaning it's not clear what we mean by time. This a concept of man, not necessarily a concept of universe, right? Like, as far as the universe goes, it has all, like, if you say time is the time that the earth goes around the sun, for instance, well, there's the earth going around the galaxy, there's the galaxy going around the cluster, there's the cluster going around the supercluster. Like, which time are you using at which scale, or when we say like an ultimate time, like an ultimate tick of the universe, what are we talking about? Well, we could say, well, maybe it's the Planck time, right? But the thing is that in order for an arrow of time to occur, like for an evolution to occur, one must have memory. Meaning, if there is no memory, then every tick is unrelated to all other ticks, and it's like, then the concept of time falls apart completely. So memory is a more fundamental concept than time. If memory is it means that and that means that, if you take an arrow of time, that in fact it's bits of information along that arrow that makes you understand that there's an evolution in time, right? That during this time, there was an evolution. And I could get in more technical terms there. I'm just trying to give a general idea that space is memory, meaning that, space memory. So the paper was called Space Memory Network for people that are more interested. And basically that, as you all know in this group, of course, space is not empty. It's full of the Planck fluctuation. These Planck fluctuations are not only random, they have coherent phases in which they produce the material world. That is, when they're coherent, they make a proton, an electron, a star, a galaxy, whatever. And so in that, and the coherence come from this fluid dynamic rotation, and you're flying through that stuff. You're on the earth and you're flying through that stuff. So think of yourself flying through a fluid on the surface of a planet, and that's going fast, right? The earth is spinning, and then it's spinning around the sun, and the sun is spinning around the galaxy, and it's going about 300 kilometers a second around the galaxy. And like it, so all these speeds add up, and that means you're leaving a very specific set of information across the surface, or across this fluid dynamics, this Planck field. Think of a trace that you're leaving, that's directly related to your coordinates in space, like where you are, what you're doing, how you're doing it, like all these things. They're leaving information on the structure of space. So you're leaving like a spiral path through space. And that's what you call your memory, meaning that your memory is actually the coordinates in space, like in which you've left imprints. And when you recall something, you're actually accessing the information in these coordinates in space. And that's what makes your reality. That's what makes your being right now. Like, that's why you have the nose of ancestors, and and so on, and that's why as well you think the way you think, you do the things you do, is because you're actually, how do you say, managing or actualizing this specific set of information, which is only individual to you, right? Because in a fractal universe, you don't have a center, meaning you can't pull a center from anything, because you can always find a larger universe or, a smaller division. So every point at every scale is the center, right? So every point observes the universe from its own center, and so every point in space is a different set of information. It sees the universe differently. It interprets the field differently, and it leaves its imprint in the space. And so you're leaving your imprint in the space, and as you think about it, as you experience it, as you feel it, you accessing the feelings, the experiences, and the thoughts of those coordinates in space. And you can go back. That means you can go back. That means, first of all, that means that your relationship to the universe is critical. That's one thing. It means as well that you have access, you have nonlinear access or non-local access to information, meaning you don't just have access to information in your surroundings, you have non-local access to information. That explains all kinds of things that are occurring to people, that are more esoteric. But one thing is that means as well that you have the capacity to change information in a coordinates in space that left a set of information or a set of memories, so that change would influence all the information forward to your present. And then since your present would be changed, then that will change your future actions and so on. And that really is something that we're discovering with genetics, for instance. William could talk about, I'm sorry, I just had a blank, but
Epigenetics? Is that
epigenetics, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and so on, and so, because things are changing, basically it's the base of psychology as well. My father was a child psychologist and so on. I discussed these theories when I was young with him. The idea that you can re-experience or re-examine a trauma that happened in your past, and that a psychologist or a psychiatrist can help you, have a different optic on that event, or a friend or a family member, and you changing your feelings and your thoughts about that event, kind of like clears up that event or changes that event in such a way that that event is no longer affecting you negatively at this moment, even physiologically, not just in your consciousness and so on. And those ideas, are correct. They just were never tied with the mechanics of space, the mechanics of physics, to understand what's really happening. We measure physiological changes in people when they change things, when trauma gets resolved in the past and so on. We see that, like, people have all kinds of placebo, capability to overcome significant issues, including cancers and so on. So this this is really important, and it's something you can do actively, meaning you can actually get in a state of deep contemplation, find that spiral that connects you, and I would suggest it's near the center of your body, like in your hara, you know, is that connection, that root connection to that spiral, and then to mentally go back and realize, you know, you're going through space, like the earth spirals around the sun as the sun is moving. So, and that there's literally millions and millions and millions and billions of kilometers in 1 year of that spiral. You're not in the same coordinates in space, so you're going back in the structure of space, and you're finding and you're following those coordinates in space. And then you can get to a point of trauma. You can get to a point where you can feel that in that place, the structure of space, I describe it personally as like a crystal that has a little fracture. And you know, and in that region, then if you look at the circumstance, you might, what I suggest for people is that they change, so their coordinates in space in relationship to that event, to change those coordinates in space to other coordinates in space, to look at this event from a different perspective, literally, I mean, even geometrically. So for instance, if there was something that happened, an interaction with another person, to like change your coordinates in space to that other person, to experience to what that other person was experiencing, how they were feeling, why they were doing what they were doing, and so on, might, you know, transform, most likely will transform the information that you left in space in that region, and resolve a lot of the unresolved problems that are occurring there, or feelings, and then you'll see the repercussion forward. And the remarkable thing is that you can keep going back and doing that to all the little fractures in the crystal, and eventually you will end up in the belly of your mom, because that's where you came from, right? That's where the spiral started. And so now you connect your spiral with your mom's spiral. And because your dad was inside your mom, even for a short amount of time, depending on the dad, you know, you are connecting with that spiral as well, you know, so there's a branching that happens there. And so then you can go back actually generations after generation along that crystal, and you can actually start to repair trauma, generational trauma, you know, across all these lines. And that might sound really esoteric, but actually, with these,
I think it's freaking amazing.
I'm sorry?
I think it's amazing. It makes so much sense to me. It makes perfect sense to me. When you first explained it like that, I'm like, holy shit, pardon my French. But let me ask you real quick. So the spiral, does it matter which way we're going from my point of reference? And which way is it, like counterclockwise or clockwise? Doesn't matter.
No, it does. You're on a planet that's spinning in a very specific direction, that's on the sun, that's following a sun that's spinning in a very it's spinning around the sun in a very specific direction,
right? So which is it
of the sun, relative to the movement of the sun, and so on. So yeah, it will, you know, if you follow your spiral, you will follow that movement through space.
So it's not really a counterclockwise or clockwise question or answer?
Well, you see, counterclockwise and clockwise is an issue, because if there's a wheel relative between you and I, right, and you say it's going clockwise, I
right. It's relative. I get it.
Disagree with you, right? Yeah. So it's it's, let's just say that if you
just go
understand
with
the
it.
movement of the earth and understand the movement of the sun, then you know the direction, right?
Right.
It will tell you the direction of
Yeah,
the spiral.
I just followed it energetically.
Yeah.
And so memory is kind of like the glue that provides coherence.
Let's
when
just say
we're-
that if you wanted direction, yeah.
It's a trail. It's
Yeah, if you were to try to define it, I would define it, and then this is going to be heuristic, so don't, yeah. But I would define it that that if you're facing forward, right behind you, it's going relative to you, looking backwards, it's going counterclockwise, right?
Yeah.
And
It was.
and forward, it's going clockwise, but well, yeah. So
I could just do this all day. I won't, but I want to say, I just want to say thank you for what you do.
Thank
Some of
you.
us people need, some of us need the science. All right. I'm an electrical engineer, and I found Bruce Lipton and Lynn McTaggart, and then Joe Dispenza and some others, and then you. And that brought me back to spirituality. And I just think that's so damn cool.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing. They're not different things. They're all the same thing. There's only one thing. And that's why I've been saying all this time, spirituality is the physics we haven't understood yet. When we understand the physics, we understand the source of consciousness, we understand the relationship or the role of consciousness, then all of a sudden, it's not separate. You can do electrical engineering of consciousness. That's what we were discussing at the beginning of the talk. It's like, wow, we're talking about little electromagnetic motors spinning, producing ATP, ripping electrons and protons. And, this is literally straight up engineering. That doesn't mean it's not miraculous and incredible and beautiful and
it just gets better and better and better. And I think it's until you reach a certain point, some of us, myself included, needed the validity that you gave it. Coming from an ex and kids that don't get any of this, they think I'm nuts. That gave me the strength to just say, screw it, I don't care what anybody else thinks anymore.
Yeah, it's okay. It will become more obvious when we publish this next paper as well.
Yeah, when is that coming out? Are you done?
I know. People are like, well, how long is it gonna take? You've been talking for a year about it. I'm like, yes, I know.
It's not exactly trivial.
Yes, let's just say that it's non-trivial amount of complexity. And the thing that's so exciting is that it's all there. It's just putting it together in a way that makes the maximum amount of bridge with what's already there in physics, so that it's clear, so that physicists in all these different sections of physics and biology can understand what we're talking about, including chemistry, and then putting it in a linear function so that the reader can read from the beginning and get. And that's hard because the beauty of these equations is that they show that it's only one thing, and that it's I'm going to use the word circular in the different context than a circular argument in physics. It's absolutely not circular. It's absolutely non-circular in terms of it's not like you put mass in to get mass out, meaning but let's just say that, and I could get onto that page of circularity because there's this misunderstanding about what a circular argument is, but because most of physics is circular, it has to be, because it has to add up. But there's some confusion there. But what what I'm saying is that it's circular in the sense that all the pieces relate to each other in such a beautiful way. It's hard to pull it apart to make a linear progression, right? So when you're writing it, you know, you're trying to talk about something that's later on in the paper because it's linear, and you can't give it now because they wouldn't understand where it came from, and you know. So anyway, it becomes difficult to write, but we're getting there, and when I'm just so excited for its result to like come out and get the feedback from the community, and as well to like publish module 8, which will have all this in it in a layman term, including, you know, Olivier and I, you know, writing the equations, you know, and explaining each equations in the paper so that everybody understand what the terms mean and why they're there, and like the mechanics that we're describing. And yeah, and it's always really blowing my mind how the mechanics are so beautiful and simple, and like how they just produce incredible results, where you can extract general relativity, special relativity, quantum mechanics, and all this from really just little things spinning in space, and producing you know, charge gradients and potentials across membrane, exchanging information in a nonlinear way, and definitely biology jumps in the middle of it, and that's really remarkable, because not only you know, the tendency when you're writing equations in physics is that you're writing the equations of the stuff that's out there, not necessarily the equation of the stuff that makes you, right? Although the stuff that's out there makes you, right? The tendency is to assume that you're outside of that, meaning that you don't have to explain how the stuff out there ended up making you, which is really important to understand the whole thing.
It's like you're trying to explain a mesh network with billions of nodes doing it one line at a time. Yeah, good luck.
Well, it's actually done. And it's really nice, because if it's correct, then it would output all the physical constants that we measure and that we see, and it does. So and then some, meaning it outputs G, the gravitational constant, in a analytical way for the first time in history. So it really is remarkable, and it's beautiful to see it. And it's like a lotus, you know, with petals, and they're all connected to the same hub, you know, so it's beautiful.
It's fabulous. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. So great to meet you.
You too. Thanks, William.
Thank you, Sabine. It makes me curious, what would happen if you were to reach forward, because you can reach back, follow the path, the spiral back, to edit memory information in the structure of space. It seems that the reverse function would also be possible.
Exactly. Very good, William. Absolutely. So you can actually anticipate. And I think, I mean, in some ways, we're doing it all the time, right? With intention, we intend to do something. We intend to meet our friend for pizza at the, you know, pizza shop at a certain time, right? Which means a certain coordinates in space relative to the Earth, right? And on a very specific coordinates in space on the surface of the Earth, and then we hopefully get there, right? And so, and there's all the coordinates of all the other intentions that are in the field that are interacting with those intentions, right? And so you might think that you're just going to get in your car and you're going to drive there, but then, as you were getting to your car, there was this that happened, somebody called you, and this, that, and this, and then on the way there, maybe there was an accident, whatever. So this is the beauty, is that the possibilities are not necessarily obvious, but however, you can, although you can't, well, I shouldn't say that. Since you're part of the system, since you're part of the network, right, you can preempt the probabilities of a certain event occurring in space. And now I'm talking about, something more advanced than just meeting your friend for pizza. That is like something more, maybe like in the future, I want to be at this level of awareness. I want to be at this, I want to have this particular experience. I want to, these things. That may seem completely outside what you can achieve at this moment, meaning like in the future, I want to, be able to spend a night in the pyramids of Egypt with nobody there, and then, put that intent, and then your capacity to produce that information bubble in the future, and then make sure that your path in space will cross that bubble. So you can think of, you've put the bubble of information in the path of the Earth in space, which must, intersect your spiral so that this event occur. It gives you the mechanics on how to do this, including the fact that you can even think, who will I have to be? What set of information will I have to carry? Who will I have to be in order for me to do all the right things so that I end up intersecting that bubble? And that you can think that in manifesting your partner, your lover, whatever, that, and so that is in looking in the back spiral, right, to change things so that it produce the future that you want to produce. So the back spiral and the forward spiral are related directly. And that's really, an important point.
And it sounds to me like you would be getting the information exchange to a certain extent, so that you can kind of adjust course where needed to increase the probability that you're going to intersect that bubble of information, that space-time coordinate in the future.
Exactly.
And that's got to be pretty useful if you're you know what your intention is, your goal, and you're receiving information exchange across the network to make it the most likely outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. So more questions.
So this one is from Richard Herrenberg. The Planck charge is about 12 electron charges. Why isn't it one electron charge? It seems that the electron should be the quantum of charge.
Oh.
So why isn't the Planck spherical unit equivalent to one electron charge? A unit charge like the electron has.
Right. That's a good question. Richard,
Richard,
I think we have him on. Oh, he's muted. Richard, can you unmute yourself? Oh, there you are. Hi, Richard.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Where are you at?
I'm in Southern California,
Okay.
Huntington
And
Beach.
wonderful. Sunny California. And are you an engineer?
Yes.
Right on. What kind?
Electrical and communications.
Wonderful. So can you repeat your question with more detail so I understand better what you're asking?
Sure. I came across the Planck charge among the various Planck quantities,
Mm-hmm.
and I presumed that this was a quantum of charge according to Max Planck.
Mm-hmm.
But when I calculated it, it turned out to be the charge of about 12 electrons.
Right.
And it seemed like the electron was a suitable definition for a Planck
Elementary
charge.
charge.
For a quantum of charge.
Yeah.
Elementary charge, quantum of charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we know so much about electrons. I was surprised that Planck came up with some number that was more like 12 electrons. And I think this relates to alpha.
Correct.
Because 12, the numbers squared is approximately equal to alpha.
Right.
But I couldn't figure out why.
Well, that's a good point. So yeah, so it's the same thing with the Planck mass, right? If you take the Planck mass, it's 10 to minus 5 grams. It's huge, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's compared to the mass of a proton or in the mass of an electron, right? It's huge. So why are we not, when we consider the holographic mass solution, why are we not considering all of the mass of the Plancks, that makes up a proton, right? For instance, right? If we did, the proton would have the mass of the universe because they're equivalent, remarkably, right? The amount of mass of Plancks inside a proton is the mass of the universe, precisely the mass of the universe. So what I'm saying is that it's because from the elementary pixel of space-time, there is screening across scales, right? There's relationship across scales, meaning that there's decoherency that happens across scales. That means that, for instance, okay, so I use the word screening for a very specific purpose. I'm using it in a technical sense. So if you wanted to look up screening Poisson, is an equation specific that is related to the Klein-Gordon equation, which is the base of quantum theory. So I'm not meaning it in a completely loose way, right? But I'm actually talking formally about it, and this is what we've done is we've understood the scaling relationship of the screening, the decoherency that occurs, right? That is screened. You could think of it like all the Planck inside the volume of a proton, right, are screened by the surface, right? Only a certain amount of exchange can occur, which reduce the energy level from the source to the surface to what we experience as the rest mass, or the elementary charge, which on the proton and the electron are the same. And so you have this very specific, so from the Planck, the relationship from the Planck charge to the electron charge has to do with the screening. So they're not the same.
Ah,
And there's and this has to do, just to give you a hint on the next paper, this has to do with the circulation of the Planck fluids, the Planck plasma dynamics, and the angular momentum of that fluid at these different scales, right? And in which, to relate to alpha, when the scale goes to the electron radius, so the Bohr radius of the electron, the velocity is alpha c. That is c going approximately 137 times slower than c, right? So so this Planck plasma is expressing a very specific relationship to angular momentum and circulation, like as a fluid in space. And the result is that depending on which scale you're looking at the movement, you get different energy levels, and that's producing what we observe as the mass and the charge and the electromagnetic dynamics of the system and its temperature. So we've solved it in all these different ways, including its entropy, which is its temperature, the Gibbs free energy of the system, and so on. So I don't know if it answers your question. I hope it does.
well, you've given me clues. I understand about screening and the electron-positron virtual particles.
Right.
And there's some theory that I've read about that, so I can picture that.
Mhm.
And I can't picture all of the plasma dynamics of the Planck spherical unit. And I picture it rather simply, and I gather I should add another level of detail to it.
Yeah, it will help when I publish the paper. You will see, like, it will be very explicit, the dynamics of the flow and what it produced as a result. For instance, we have from first principle analytical solution to charge for the first time, meaning where charge comes from, how it gets there, and so on. So, so it's really, and it has to do with the impedance of space of this Planck plasma and so on. So it really is like, without being able to give you all the details of the paper, it's hard. But when you get the paper, you will be able to follow it very simply, very clearly, and you'll see what exactly you'll be able to measure or to calculate very exactly the relationship between the Planck field charge, or the Planck charge, and the elementary charge. It's called elementary charge in physics, which is the electron charge or the proton charge, but the elementary charge really should be the Planck charge because it's its source. And in our case, we go beyond that because we give the source of charge in the first place, which is very specific mechanical dynamics of space.
That actually connects to another question I had. Where does charge come from? So I think you're telling me that answer is in the next module.
Exactly. It will be. Yes.
Great.
Yeah, I'm very excited to publish that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now, not to complicate things, I've also tried to figure out what the photons look like coming from the vibrating Planck spherical unit, and what both the particles look like. And it seems like they're radiating in all directions, as if the Planck spherical unit is glowing white hot. And
Right.
And then the waves would be some very interesting combination of waves at different frequencies, but that's about as far as I could figure out what was going on. And I'd love to find that in the next module.
Yeah, the nature of light, you're asking, the nature of photons, we give the fundamental nature of charge and the electromagnetic field. And so, however, we address so much in this paper, we're not able to like dig in too much detail about the specific geometric dynamics of the photons themselves, which we can discuss later on. But I would suggest, if you're trying to visualize it, that you visualize a toroid wave front that in the plasma fluid that is toroidally, more specifically polodially, transferring through space, and that would give you a clue, I think, that of the geometry of the system, and you can imagine that energy level being able to be transferred by angular momentum coupling to other particles and structures you were asking about. And again, all this geometry will become more clear in the next paper relative to these forces, charge, or electromagnetic fields and gravitational field, because there's a component that's gravitational with this that you can't remove. And that has been the problem. It's been separated. You have a relationship between the electromagnetic propagation vectors and the gravitational scalar oscillation in the structure of space, if you want to think about it this way, like the wave function of when you throw a rock in a pond, right? Like these wave function, like scalar compressive wave, and then an electromagnetic component which is vectorial, at the epicenter. So this will be more clear again in the next paper. I'm so sorry, I've been saying that for a year, and I get how annoying that must be for everybody out there. I apologize, deeply. I just want to publish in a very complete way, and I want to make sure it's all exact and correct.
Well, thank you. I certainly understand, oops, pardon my dog here. I certainly understand that the theory of everything will take a long time to explain.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of an eternity, and I gotta know where to cut it, and that's hard, because it's like, wow, look at this piece. It's so good. It works so good. We gotta put it in, right?
Yeah. I fully understand. In fact, it will certainly lead to more questions.
Yes.
And I appreciate just a little bit more understanding, so I can kind of keep up with everybody.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad you're on the call, and keep connecting with us and moving the ball forward. We need really a lot of help right now. We're arriving at the finish line on many different levels, and at the same time, we are needing the support of the community more than ever. We need more and more people to be aware of this stuff. We need the support of everyone out there, like so much. It's so critical, so important, so that we can deliver this in the most powerful way. So I really, really appreciate your participation.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm certainly spreading the word.
Thank you, Richard. So great to meet you.
Have a great day.
You too. All right, more questions. Oh, I lost William.
Sorry, I'll bring him right back.
Thank you. Let's see. There was questions. Oh, there he is.
I'm not sure what just happened there, but I think
That was a user error glitch in the matrix.
Oh, okay. But it's going to erase all the Q&A. But it's okay because
it has?
Yeah. So all the questions are posted. I don't see those anymore.
Oh, no.
But there was one though that I was gonna bring up for the next topic of discussion. It kind of ties back in with what we were discussing at the beginning, and it had to do with the water in the mitochondria. So those ATP synthase motors, they're spinning in water, and a key thing for everybody to remember, to keep in mind, is that water is orchestrating nearly every function, every interaction in the cell, in the biological system. Nearly every single interaction is being mediated by the water, and it's coordinating to a large extent what is going to occur in that environment. But so one of the questions was, we were talking about that it's spinning in a veritable plasma. So the question was, and I believe this was from Luke Archambault, is this related to Dr. Gerald Pollack's fourth phase of water? And it's kind of, actually something really interesting to think about, because certainly, like within the inner compartment of the mitochondria and what's called the matrix, this is where you have like the mitochondrial genome. This is where the finished ATP product is stored and transported out of the mitochondria. In that compartment, certainly you're talking about atomically ordered water. So this is in a quasi-crystalline phase, a fourth phase of water, like what's described by Dr. Gerald Pollack is easy water. Certainly, you're going to have some of that in the matrix. However, in the intermembrane space, where you've got this huge concentration of protons and a lot of vortexes, a lot of vorticular motion, you're going to have an extremely high coherent state. So plasma modes that have a spin component to them are coherent. So a lot of long-range correlation and even synchronization occurring in this system. But I don't think you could equate that with Dr. Gerald Pollack's EZ water. And in particular, because that semi-crystalline phase of the water, it gets that moniker EZ because it stands for exclusion zone. So the water actually, because it's behaving a little bit more like a solid than like a liquid, it will exclude solutes from entering. So, in some of these reaction compartments in the mitochondria, where you need solutes, you need metabolites and redox molecules that are going to accept and transfer protons and electrons. You don't want easy water in some of these reaction zones. Nevertheless, because of the spin component, I'm sure that the water is still very coherent, very ordered.
Right. Well, that's a good one. And I'm glad you answered that one. But as well, I think that the concept of easy water is a great concept, exclusion zone water, and definitely the work that Gerald did is remarkable in being able to not only measure more accurately what goes on there, but even extract easy water in certain state, like a solid state. That was room temperature, solid state of water. It's kind of strange, but that to see that the water molecule and the way water function, which is from which all life emerged, is not such a clear and clean understanding in the standard model, and that there's something much more profound that's happening in the water structure that makes it possible for life to emerge from it. Then there was another question, this one from Lynn Sylvia O'Connor. If we want to bring her on, I think, how will this new understanding of the makeup of our individual and collective existence contribute to the good of all? So that's a good question. Excuse my shady reading. That's just my dyslexia kicking in. Hi. Oops, you're muted.
Okay, there we go.
Hi.
Hi, I am so excited to see what this is going to look like to bring it to the public, to bring it to the common individual, to be able to begin to have it understood at some level and help actually help midwife this whole understanding into the populace. So what can you tell me about how to do that?
Lynn, where are you at?
I'm on the coast of Maine in the United States.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, so okay, well, clearly we're going to do that through the channels of the scientific community and the peer-reviewed journals and so on, as well through technological demonstration shortly thereafter, that have to do with, demonstrating these effects are occurring. And some of the technological demonstration have been done already by other parties, like accelerators measuring properly the radius of the proton and so on. But what I think is more important, this is why I picked your question, is that as the public understand this, right? As the world understand this, that it has been found, and it's so consistent, it's so solid, it's so, you can't move any piece. Everything is out with 12-digit accuracy. You can't move any piece anywhere. There's no free parameters. There's no, there's no funny business. There's no new particle you got to invent that, like, like dark matter that interacts gravitationally but not electromagnetically. And, you don't have to do any hand waving. And so when the population will understand that, then I mean, as the world understand that, it becomes clear the unification for even philosophy, unification of religions, unification of our understanding of our reality, of ourselves in it. I mean, it has profound capability to transform the world at a very deep level. The way we organize, the way we interact, the way we treat each other, which is really the first step of a more evolved humanity, a more evolved civilization, is really to unify, realize that we're all on a small rock flying through space, and we better understand how that all works. And we better understand it in time, because these small rocks flying through space, they get knocked out all the time. And, just like electrons don't do, and so on. It's just at a different time scale. But for the universe, it's for sure, there's going to be a sun flare, there's going to be and comet, there's going to be something at one point that will intersect our path and change the environment on the surface. And it doesn't need to change much for us to, just be kind of taken out of it and reorganized. So basically there's a little bit of a ticking, time clock for us to unify, just like the bacteriums we were talking about earlier, unified, figured out how to function together to produce something really positive for the whole. And I think we're really, really there now. And having the physics is just undeniable. Physics that's undeniable, it's there, right? So it's like, yeah, these religions and these philosophies and all this were, kind of in the ballpark, right? But here is how it is, how it works, and and it includes, like spiritual thoughts and spiritual understanding, and it includes all that stuff, because it's not a linear relationship. It's unified, and it's unified for the very reason that it is non-local and it's a network. And so when you ask, like, what it will produce for humanity,
For the good, and can it be misused?
So yes, everything can always be misused. Um, uh,
So are we staying out ahead of the curve to be able
well,
to tell people that they are in charge of their existence, and we're going to let them know how to be able to utilize that knowledge and ability to be able to build a better world? Yes?
right. The thing is that the physics themselves, the theory itself, defeat the concept of individuality and selfishness in such a way that misusing it would literally go against what the theory says, meaning that, like, it says that everything is unified, everything influences everything else, that what you do over here will have an impact over there, and all this. And I think that with what happened in the last few years on planet Earth, we're finally at a place where people are really, you know, in a place where they are really wanting the next level. They really want it. The population, I'm talking, not necessarily the institutions. However, the population is the people in charge, unlike what the institution believe, and there's gonna be, of course, there's an evolution through this, but I'm confident. I'm really confident that it will produce positive results. One of them being, for instance, if I give you an example, let's say that all of a sudden you can produce energy wherever you are, right?
Mhm.
And this information is known to all around the world. It's available, right? The tendency to war for energy becomes a little bit irrelevant. Right? The tendency to like wanna, conquer other countries because of their energy resources, or like the battle, which has been like a really fundamental battle, goes away. And the stressors for humanity capacity to have abundance and have everything they need becomes much higher. If you can produce energy anywhere, you can greenify, deserts. You can desalinate water to produce drinking water. You can do all kinds of things. You can uh, transfer massive amount of goods across the world easily. So and then there's much less impact or zero impact on the environment when you're producing that energy, and so on. This um, right there removes a lot of the stressors.
Well, let me jump in, okay? If we're talking also consciousness and feeding the field,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Then where does all of the preoccupation with violent video games put us in a conscious way as being a preoccupation of so much of humanity right now?
Right. The don't I my tendency would be to reply, don't underestimate the capability of the human awareness, right? So um, the children that are doing this at this moment and spending so much time doing this
It's not
actually,
yeah.
yes, uh, and I mean the big children with them,
Yes.
right? Are thinking of the what brings them joy is the feeling of accomplishment in what they're doing, like as they're winning this game or so on. Um, they're not necessarily experiencing the violence as something that is an appropriate behavior in the world. Like the the population of the world in general is benign. Most people want to be healthy, happy, have their family be safe. Most people are gentle with each other. They don't, most people don't impose their their way of thinking on others. They are happy to have conversation about it, and philosophize about different points of view. It really, the populations are much more advanced than we give them credit for. It's just that our institutions have not been able to actually express this. Our institutions have been set up in such a way that they are directing humanity in a way that's not necessarily so positive, right? Meaning there's quite a bit of censoring of the population, right? That's occurring. There's screening, right? So the screening, right? The screening is on its way to like getting less screen, meaning it's on its way to, the population is realizing more and more the screening that has been going on, the veils, right, that have been placed. They're removing the veils, they're realizing what needs to be done. The new generations are coming in ready for that transformation. They're amazing, right? I have two kids. I see the other kids. They see through the veil pretty quickly. And so I'm very encouraged. I'm very enthusiastic about the future. I think, we're going through moments of birthing pains, and it can look a little horrible. When you're a baby and you're in your mother's womb for 9 months and everything is mellow and everything is copacetic and then all of a sudden it's a time for birth, you might, on that side of the event horizon, you might think you're dying.
Right.
But when you get on the other side, you actually were born, right? So I think we're in the channel, right? In the birth channel, and it's looking a little bit squeezy and a little bit like
Messy.
messy. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good word. Well, thank you so, so much. I want to thank you. I am not a scientist. I am not a mathematician. I saw you first with the Gambles on Thrive, both 1 and 2, and I've been on board for the different Q&As and so on. And you are making this so accessible to all of us. And for that, I give you so much gratitude, because it has allowed me to be able to flow with what you're bringing to us. And I want to bring it beyond myself to others. So thank you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate. Thank you, Lynn. And yeah, it's critical that we make it available and accessible for everybody, because everybody needs to know this stuff. So, I'm happy to write it in Greek for the physicists, so they get the equation and they see that it adds up. But on the other, the important part is to actually convey that to the public, and so that they understand the mechanics of their own existence and the universe they live in, and how they can transcend some of the limitations. When I'm talking about life extension, people say, oh my God, are you talking about living hundreds of years? And I'm thinking, because the only thing that happens is that your ATP production slows down, basically, right? You start producing less energy. There's a decoherence. Well, if you know those mechanisms, if you know where the energy comes from, then you can spin that up, right? Now, people might think, oh, wow, that sounds really like esoteric and really in the future, but people don't realize, like, this life expectancy only 150 years ago was what, like 40 years old, and so we've doubled the life expectancies in a very short time, cosmologically speaking, and it's exponential. Although the life expectancies in the Western world has dropped for the first time in history in the last few years. Now I could argue why, and I'm not gonna get on that subject because that could get me in serious amount of trouble. But I'm gonna just say that, like, there's no need for it to drop. We can actually, and I think we're gonna be able to, like, go to the next level, and the I mean, scientists in laboratory have been able to sustain cells alive for, I don't know, 40 years. Is that right, William?
The Gila cell line, I believe it originated in the 1960s. So maybe late 1960s. So I mean, it's getting 50, 60 years old around. I've worked with Gila cells.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, they're immortalized cells. They are immortal. You know, kind of the base level of life is immortal. So you know, it's actually kind of an interesting perspective that we have that there is an infinite regenerative capacity of the biological system, because there is, especially when you consider the biophysics we're writing, where there's a mechanism that it's coupling to the extremely low entropy field of the Planck plasma state.
Right. Well, you know, I got on another subject, but thank you, Lynn. It's great to have you on board, and stay in touch.
Well, okay, thank you both. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Myself out of here. Thank you.
Do you have more questions now, William, or you still?
You know, it's interesting. I do have one question that's displaying. So it is actually regarding what we were discussing on the operation of reaching out into the future. Should I read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
And then I'll be the last questions. I just realized we've been going long, and you know, we're having so much fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, there was also a question on what is a stem cell. That would be another one that
Oh
I
yeah, you
could
could
jump
go
on.
for that, because
Okay.
that's your field.
Yeah, and I think there's some interesting things that folks could glean from exactly what is a stem cell. And me and Nassim were working on some ideas with stem cell applications. That's definitely very early to be discussing, but just FYI. So if you consider the tissues that comprise your body, you've got thousands and thousands of different cell types. So some of these are pretty obvious. You've got skin cells, muscle cells, brain cells, neurons, heart cells. I could go on because there's thousands of different kinds of cells. And what's interesting is that every single one of those cells has nearly the exact same genome. So roughly speaking, every cell in your body has the exact same genome. So how do you get a cell to become a skin cell or a muscle cell if it has the same genome? The way that this is done is through epigenetic regulatory mechanisms. So not all of the genome is expressed equally in each cell. So in some cells, certain segments of the genome is silenced. There's actually technical terms for this. There's euchromatin and there's heterochromatin. And in a microscope, you can actually see the difference between these, in that if you look at the nucleus of a cell, with it's undergoing active transcription of the DNA, or what you'll see is areas of the DNA that are expanded and open. That's euchromatin. That's where the information is being accessed, the genes are being transcribed. And then there's other regions where the DNA is compressed. The nucleoprotein is compressed, and that's heterochromatin. And so the ratio, the area of the genome that is euchromatin and heterochromatin is different in each cell type. And so that's how you get different kind of cells. Now, in a stem cell, what you have is that ratio of euchromatin to heterochromatin and where it's at in the genome has not yet been determined. So it has the capability to differentiate into a large range of different cell types. Now, there are differing degrees of a cell's stemness. So there are partially differentiated cells, stem cells. These are like the kind of stem cells that you can find in the bone marrow. These are the blood cell precursors. So you've got stem cells in your bone marrow, and they're partially differentiated. So they can differentiate into red blood cells, white blood cells, all the different kind of cell types that are in the blood. Then, though, you also have stem cells that are undifferentiated completely. These are pluripotent stem cells. These are stem cells that can differentiate into any kind of cell type. And what's interesting is that you have these stem cells circulating through your body. These are pluripotent monocytes. And so the genome in these cells have not yet received the signals saying which areas of the genome are going to be condensed and silenced and which areas are going to be opened up to determine the cell's function. And so this provides your body with a regenerative mechanism where you have these circulating stem cells, and if they come to like a site of injury, a place where you need to replenish tissues, they can receive the signals and begin to replenish tissues. That doesn't always occur optimally. So there are therapeutic methods that are being developed to try to enhance that effect, boost the body's own regenerative capacity. So essentially, a stem cell is a cell in the body that can regenerate and replenish the tissues of the body.
And you produce them.
Yes, yeah. And, so that is the stem cells, oftentimes they have mechanisms involved that allow them to undergo many different divisions. So mitosis, mitotic divisions. Now, these terminally differentiated cells, like your skin cells, your neurons, your muscle cells, they don't have that capacity to continuously divide. So purposefully, the mechanism for kind of continuous division is shut down and stopped in these terminally differentiated cells so that they only get about 50 cellular divisions before they can no longer divide. So in the stem cells, you have a lot of different kind of mechanisms at play. One of them is like the telomerase. Every time the cell divides, the ends of the chromosomes are reduced a little bit. And that's why many of the terminally differentiated cells can only divide about 50 times because the ends of the chromosomes start to flay out, and it is read as broken DNA, and it shuts down the whole cell and undergoes apoptosis. But in the stem cells, the ends of the chromosomes are continuously replenished via what's called a telomerase enzyme that replenishes the telomeres. And so the stem cells are able to continuously divide and provide bioregeneration throughout life. One of the things that occurs in aging is that capacity of the stem cells starts to get tamped down so that they're not able to continuously regenerate. And this has to do with balancing with a cancer potential, the potential for the cells to kind of go haywire. The body starts to tamp down on everything. But again, that's something that can be solved by increasing the coherence.
Right. And the energy levels.
and the energy levels.
Yeah. So we're at the end of our time together. Thank you so much, William. Thank you, Jamie, for helping out today. And it's so great to be with you all and listening to all the great comments and questions and so on. And you know, as I was saying, we're at a really important junction, both globally, but and as well with the Resident Science Foundation and Taurus Tech and all this. So we need your support, we need your help to get the word out, but as well to you know, if you have any interest in you know, helping with resources and so on, like becoming a member helps us as well, and as well if you know people with you know large resources and so on to help us with the research. It's always, you know, something we work on, and getting all the work done is a big job. And so we appreciate all of your support in every way you're able to provide it, even if it's just taking a few minutes every day to connect with your own cellular metric and atomic metric, which is critical, and to connect with the fundamental field at that level. And I literally mean it, meaning that going inwards is not just a conceptual idea, but it's like integrating you, that you're made of trillions of cells that are made of trillions of atoms each, and so on. And if you do that, you connect with the field, which you're already connected with, but you become aware of it. And with your awareness raising into the field, you can have a larger influence and a powerful transformation in your life can occur, and in the life of the people around you, and in the life of all of humanity eventually, because we're all connected through this amazing fundamental field of expression that makes up all of our existence. So thank you so much for being here. I look forward to the next time. And until then, may the vacuum be with you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.